Typical scenario, organization has Ldap, very often it's Active Directory. And why maintain two separate systems of, people information when you have it in Active Directory? Now, we've probably all seen some pretty dirty Active Directory systems. So you've got to hopefully you trust your Active Directory system. But what we're going to show is the Atrium Integrator pieces and the custom application to bring it all together. So common issues of the DMT jobs, they error because the location or organization information fed from AD isn't in your remedy system. So that'll throw an error. The job errors because the Ldap manager of a user account is not in people form for whatever reason. Or what tends to happen is the naming's not right. By default, it wants to combine the middle initial if they have one. And sometime, Ldap and AD, from what I've seen, rarely match up in that regard. So once you start throwing that middle initial in, things seem to break. So what we've got is a console, so you can review your information. I know DMT has that to a degree, but I like my solution better. And the other thing we saw early on was error handling. The customer I built this for, they were bringing in almost 200,000 Ldap records, AD records a night, big school district, and they had all kinds of people in there. And the error log filled up, AR error log filled up almost every day because the organizations and the managers. So we put some error handling on it so we can capture that error, not send it to the AR error log, but then we can review it in the console. The other thing that really cleaned things up was the managers. I don't know if you guys have experienced the problems with managers coming in from AD and the people mismatch. What we built was we build the list of managers from AD, reference people data, and that's all we use. So if they were found in people, we'll use them as a manager. If they weren't, we'll get the manager later when the data issues are worked out. Let's go for the demo. So this was built on AR 2002 with Itsm. And what we've got here, we've got our Active Directory system. Oh, I can't start with my RDP. So what we've got demoed here, there's 3 OUs in Active Directory, one old one that we're not continually populating anymore, but it had some old records in there. I wanted to show that those in there, they remain untouched, and we have some filtering to show those untouched records. Here's our 2 main OUs. So we're going to be bringing in 2 different organizational units. And this is my system of rock stars. Got all kinds of various bands in here and their members. So let's see. So that's the data we're working with. Let's get this out of the way. Well, the question was, are rock stars mostly unsupervised? In this case, they are supervised. How well? That's to be determined. Maybe the managers add to the party, who knows? So let's see here. Here is the console, and like I was saying, unfortunately, this is a little blurrier on the screen than I would like. Let's zoom. Kind of read that. So it defaults to errors and warnings. Let's just view all companies. Oh, real quick. So here's some filtering that we have, and this is data driven. We'll get into that later, but you can basically put whatever query you want in there. And here's all 8 of my old organizational unit users in here. These are the ones, we're not going to touch them. They were just from something we did a long time ago. Let's see, let's pop one of these open. So right here's an example of the error checking that we're doing. So Judge Judy has a really, really long name. And instead of failing that record, we record it that it's a warning and truncate it. We still go ahead and put it in people, but we flag it that there's an issue, and that can be reviewed from the console and maybe you call your AD people and say, hey, clean up Judge Judy. But this is here our staging form. And it does, through the process, there's 3 main phases. There's a populate, a validate, and then promote. As it goes through that, it will match up existing people records so we can see, it gets their license type, support staff. So we don't stomp on that, we can maintain it. And then also it's nice to just have the full record here. Okay. So let's see here. Let's take a look at the spoon job real quick. So here is the job, and it's broken up into 2 transformations. Here's the one to get the manager, and then here's to create the people once we have that list of managers. And here's all my dummy troubleshooting. These are invaluable for watching the data flow as it goes from step to step. Because at times you find the people, it's using the people record ID for the manager that's linking that. And once it gets to this debug 6, as I was working this out, I'd see the people record wasn't there. Then I start working back. Where did it go? And on a real quick side note, if you guys are on Windows and have Beartail, this can tail your log files in real time. So as that job runs, I can just follow the data in here and see that the data is building. And like I was saying here, over here, here's the people record. So I know these work. So that was huge for troubleshooting and getting this working right. Let's see here. So we get the managers, and that's basically getting a list of all the user records in the OU. And let me show you, because we're using variables. So we're using, good practice, and this is part of my topic on Thursday, using variables instead of hard coding your information. And where it's searching from is part of the job we're running, and we'll look at that in a minute. So this is dynamic based on how you run it. And really, we're only getting the person's just the manager information. And we will go through, we remove any of the records that don't have managers. We sort them because the spoon, grouping likes that. Then we group it so we get a unique list of the managers. We get their usernames. Now, one interesting, I wasn't thrilled with this, is I have to use a Cmdb lookup. And this causes some interesting workarounds. If anybody has any ideas how to not do this other than going to the database, I didn't want to have to add another connection. I'd love to hear it. But there's no AR lookup. There's a Cmdb lookup. So as you got all your users in the stream, you can look them up and reference. And because I built this off a use case with a really large directory structure, I didn't want to load all my users just to filter them out. I want to take that performance hit. So I really wanted to do a lookup. So I'm querying the user in my stream and finding their information from Remedy versus just give me everybody in Remedy and I'll whittle it down. So that's why I went the CMDB route. But we'll see that they have to be in your CMDB for one, in the people class. And when you run this, you have to reconcile them because they won't show up. The managers won't show up unless you properly reconcile them. That is assuming you're using the CMDB sandbox. And one other thing. So when I originally built this for my customer, I went through the trouble of figuring out how to pass the data between the transformations. So this list of managers, I passed it here. It took me a long time, many late nights. It was more difficult than I really would have thought it should have been, setting up the parameters and passing them. So ever since that, when I build these dependent transformations, I just write it to a file and I'll pick it up in the next step. That was so much easier for me than trying to pass the data. It's possible, but I had a hard time getting it to work. It became one of those personal challenges. I'm going to get this to work, and I did. But after that, I decided I'm writing the files. And so here's the create people. This one's pretty basic. You can add additional logic, obviously. But this is getting all of your people in the OU. It is data-driven. It's going to set their manager to lower, sort their managers, and then here's where it looks up that file that we wrote in the last step. And this is where we're merging up the people from AD and getting their pre-validated managers. So we know when we put it into people, it's already good. We don't have any weird name issues, nothing. It's all, unless I make a liar out of myself, we're using people ID.
Is your database Oracle then in this case?
No, this is SQL Server.
So why are you making it lower on the manager?
Habit, just for comparison, because, well, and because Spoon is a Java process. From what I've seen, most of that handles in case and sensitivity okay. But in the case of the customer I'm talking about, we actually did do some JavaScript processing too. And so I just went ahead and made it all lower. Okay, so in that case, I'm using the SAM account name. But there is, in the workflow, the people records are referenced. So we know, because we've got a good people record, let's use it. So let's go ahead and take a look at the jobs. And so in here, we've got 2 jobs set up. I've run them a ton. So we've got them for my Calbro OU and my Remedy Zoo. And if you pop that open and take a look at the load step, we can see down here that I am using the OU, the search base. I'm passing in the organizational unit I want to search. So this is my Remedy Zoo users that match up to AD. If we go look at Calbro services, we'll be looking at their OU. When I originally inherited, somebody started this build and I took over for them. It was different transformations for each organizational unit. They had one for their employees, one for their contractors. And as we started enhancing the transformations, that was just unbearable to go make sure they all run the same just because the OU is different. So that's where I dove in and made this data driven, same transformation, you just reuse it. So let's go ahead, let's run these. And as we saw, we only have 8 users in here. Double check, we're in all companies, that's everybody. So let's create a new job. This is Calbro. A lot of scrolling here. And I'm going to schedule this just so I don't wait while it hangs and processes, so I can schedule the other one while this thinks about it in the background. So that was Calbro. Let's find our Remedy Zoo. Just need to build it. Save. Schedule. We'll just do this once. Now, one thing I've been tossing, or I have been kicking around in my head, and I really want to build this at some point, is if you've used these, you know that if the job doesn't complete successfully, the next scheduled time doesn't get scheduled. So if this was a reoccurring on daily or weekly, if you encounter an error because of the manager information or the organizational information, if there's one of those records is flagged as an error, this job's not going to run the next scheduled time. You have to come in, you know, reschedule it, fix the problem, reschedule it. I'd love to figure out a little add-on where you can put the schedule in there and it monitors. And it says, okay, you failed. I'm going to reschedule you. Ideally, you would do some checking so it doesn't fail every night and just, you know, go crazy. And I've seen sometimes where these jobs don't stop. So you want to be careful of that. But that's an enhancement for later. I really would like to get figured out. So let's see. Give those a moment to run. So this first run, it's going to create our people, but it's going to leave off the managers because those aren't going to pre-validate. They're chicken and the egg. They're not in people yet. So the first transformation that validates the managers doesn't have them in there as managers. So that's where this initial run will bring in their people. There we go. Let's start the progress. We'll run reconciliation. The next time it runs, now it can do that Cmdb lookup step and say, okay, yeah, I've got you as a manager, or in people, you're a good manager, and then it will update. So give that a moment. So one thing I did note, I don't know if many of you know this, but I found while I was going through this process is running through this over and over again. I would delete my people records so I can bring them in fresh. That doesn't delete their CMDB person object. So if you don't remove those, run it again, your IDs and the name create a conflict. So, you know, that's probably more in a build and repeat kind of scenario where you got to worry about that. But just one thing to note, if you, as you're building this and, you know, you run through it, dump your data, run through it again, you'll have to clear out those people records to avoid a conflict. Sorry, person in the person class. Okay, so this next one should be kicking off any moment. Let's take a look real quick. We should have more people here. Okay, and let's see, I'm losing some of my columns because I zoomed in. Let's see, Ldap. Do I have it? There we go, manager login ID. So we can see here, my columns. Okay, so we can see here that we have some managers listed, but they weren't in the people. So no login ID. We're just ignoring them for now. And if we go over to people, let's pop one of these open. We can see it went ahead and created it. We just left the manager off because we didn't have good manager information. That's okay. We'll catch it later. If we look through, you know, none of these have the manager. We'll get that at a later time. So that should give us time for this to finish. Oh, it's still running. Okay. Let me make sure while we're doing that, my CMDB connection hasn't timed out because it tends to do that. Okay, we're good. And we're going to run the sandbox bulk. Once that's complete. You should be done any moment now. So while that's running, so we'll see. These are my old users, but the majority of all the new people are in the sandbox data set. And this is why we've got to run the reconciliation, because it's I built the step to only look for promoted people. I could have looked to the sandbox. I didn't think that was a very good practice. So, you know, I'm trying to obey the CMDB rules. And usually it doesn't take that long. My poor little VM. Huh. Let's see. 42. Okay, we're 178. I think that's everybody. So DMT just hasn't updated yet. Let's go ahead and reconcile. Start the job. Back to our person class. We went from 74 to 207 records and 49 still going. So now we can set up these jobs to run. Again, we're going to get the managers in. So it is that two-step process, but the benefit is you avoid the errors because you're pre-validating everybody. And that's my remedy zoo. Let's run a Kelbro. Oops. Built. Yeah, 15. Okay, so give that a moment to kick off. So while we're waiting for that, I'll come over and show the filtering. We'll take a look at these. So I just kind of came up with some things that I thought made sense. Here's all companies. I can filter by company if I want. I think more importantly are your various statuses. So you can check all that are warning. You can check the errors. You know, these are the hard errors. So these are the ones that would have normally ended up in AR error log, but because we added the error filter, error handling filter, it didn't go to error log. We were able to capture it here. And this one, I purposely set up good old Wolfgang Van Halen here with a duplicate ID in AD just to trigger this error to show it's going to capture an error, but you know, everybody else is going to progress or process just fine. Let's see. And I also went, so this is across the board. I also went to the level, to the company level. If I only want to see the warnings for Calibro, you can do that. Let's see here. But miscellaneous, here's, you know what, I probably should have shown this earlier before I started. Oh no, here we go. So yeah, this will let you see that the person has a manager in AD, but in people, we didn't get that manager. So if you're really depending on those managers being in your people form, this would be a good search to see whether that data is coming in or not. So this list of 153 people is about to get a lot shorter now that we've reconciled the person class and have the manager data for the lookup. The other one, support staff, you know, it hasn't. I should have flagged some. Let's see if they come in. The other, nope. Okay, and then here's a not updated recently. So this was helpful to identify when we had a large set of records in AD that for whatever reason were no longer updating. So maybe, you know, they aged out of the system, they're inactive, they were removed from AD. These are the ones that aren't getting touched. So, and that's why I left that old OU in there, just so we could show this filter. They haven't been touched in 24 hours. So one piece I did not get a chance to rebuild was the archiving. I haven't got to that part since I started from scratch. But ideally, there would be the job to see they're no longer in AD or they're disabled. Let's update your people record to whatever your practice is, make them obsolete, archive them, whatever the case might be. So let's see here. Let's check our jobs real quick.
Isn't that also flagging any profiles that are not in Ldap, or is it just straight out of Ldap? Like you have BMC Orchestrator, you have the BMC admins profiles.
That's a good point. It would if you had the import record.
I mean, these profiles aren't in Ldap; they're in CTM people. Are you looking at CTM people that haven't been updated?
No, I haven't built that part.
Okay,
but that's a good idea.
Because I would have to run a daily report to my contact at my company for any record that hasn't been updated by Ldap.
Gotcha. Okay.
And he gets a list of, we have like 20 profiles that are not in Ldap.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. That's an interesting case. I'm gonna have to think about that one. I like that idea, being able to search that the other way.
Right.
I like that. That's great.
So are you doing a replace or an update?
The question was if I'm doing a replace or an update when I bring in the information. It's an update, both the staging record and then people. Originally, when we had built this for a customer with a large directory, we were dumping them and bringing them up. And it was a lot of processing, and we found we didn't need it.
So Lenny's question would apply then, since you're just doing updates, there might be records in there that don't belong in.
Exactly. Yep, exactly. And that's where we went with the filter, show me what hasn't been updated, because you're right. We weren't deleting when we were dumping them every night. Obviously there were no old records. Everything was current. Yeah.
Well, my customer uses email address, and then when they're leaving the company, they'll put disabled at the end of the email address, and they'll come in and create a new profile. So I had to build workflow that whenever
Awesome.
a disabled email address came in, go find the original one and remove all the permissions and put it in obsolete, and then mark it for delete for the one that came in as disabled. So we wouldn't have that Now, the only hard part is if it's a support staff and they have open tickets, then it flags as an error and then it gets sent out as a notification to the manager. He has to go in and clean it up. But it works pretty well.
Sounds like an ingestion problem.
The comment was, it sounds like an ingestion problem, referring to Darius's earlier presentation, that's pretty clever.
Yeah.
So here you can see that we've run it again, and now that the person class was reconciled, we can use that data to actually look up the managers, and now we can see that we have a manager in AD, and we also used it for the people record. So if we open up, let's see, Ray here, we can see now that he has a manager of Robert Plant. Who wouldn't want Robert Plant as their manager?
Well, he's dead now, but so he'll never be watching over me.
You know, I built this before then. So let's see real quick. Here's, and if you've messed with the ITSM predefined queries, I totally admit I followed their nice design. I replicated what they were doing because I liked it so much. But this is to show you that everything in the console is data driven. So you could put any combination you want in here. You know, for like Lenny was saying, he has different use cases of things he's looking for. We could filter on the end of the email address. What was it, deleted or disabled? We could create a filter for that if that's something you wanted to watch in here.
I mean, it does come in handy because November 24th, the people that run Ldap did not modify 2,900 profiles. And I didn't see an update occurring in CTM people since 24 November. So I brought it to the attention of the administrator. What happened to these profiles? Apparently, they all became contractors instead of employees, or something else happened to them that they moved to whatever organization. So they had to go in and fix the profiles to either say disabled, which means we have to remove them, or they had to go in and do some adjustment to move them somewhere else to make them adjust. So I'm watching every day. They do 100 a day, and I see that number dropping. So it's going to take them 30 days to update those profiles.
So you just flagged them as missing?
No, the report came up and said you haven't touched this since the 24th of November. And then when I looked at it, there was 2,900 profiles that had not been touched in that time period. So when Ldap came in and then tried to do the update, it said that they didn't bring the record into the Ldap. So then when I looked at it, it wasn't updated by Ldap. So I'm looking from the other side. You're looking from the Ldap side. I'm looking at from the CTM side saying Ldap didn't do this. So why? And so that's the excuse I got back from them. I can't get into Ldap, but I can tell what they're doing or not doing. So.
Yeah, and that's interesting because the one piece I didn't get a chance to rebuild in here was the archive, but then that would be the third case of they're in your people but not Ldap.
Right.
Yeah, that's really cool, and really kind of what you're discussing there is why we ended up building all these, and these are just my examples. So my customer had various things they were looking for. Now, as we're talking about it, I thought what just came to mind was you have to actively go here and run these, check your different filters. So it'd be really cool to actually take this to the next level and put it in a report. That way there's no intervention. You just get the report.
Right.
That would be very cool as well.
I definitely like what you have with the managers. We don't have managers in because they don't have it in Ldap. So
yeah,
that throws a wrench in our process to say who's the manager.
Most places I've worked with don't have the managers. A few of my more recent customers did this, and this one, this customer we built this for did have it for their employees, and I think contractors. So that became very important, and we were getting lots of failures because of the mismatch.
Right.
That was huge. So really, that's it. It works really well. We were, like I said, we were doing large volumes every night. And we really got this thing running like a top for them. It was great. Any questions?
Yeah, what are you using for your unique ID?
Good call. So, oh, thank you. The question was, what are we using for our unique ID in AD? So I set this up as in the import record, we are using the login ID because everybody will have that. We know that. But when it's looking for people records, it's looking for corporate ID or the login ID. And I haven't fully tested that out here because if somebody's login ID changes, you might get to some weird situations, which fortunately the error handler would catch, then you go adjust for it. But right here, so when updating the upsert is using the username, the SAM account name, but then the validate promote, and here we can just dive into the workflow a little bit. So we've got the different stages. We have the populate, and this is, oh, one thing I didn't mention is location. We'll set a default location. Part of this, the validation process is we check the site. Is it valid in remedy? Because that's also another point of failure. If it's not valid, we'll just give you a default. So we could still bring in the record, but it needs attention. And that would actually probably be a good filter too. Here's all your people in AD that don't have good site information that should get fixed. But so when we're going to the promote, if I remember right, no, actually, I'm sorry, at this point, I have already have the people. No, I am, okay. So yeah, we're using the login ID or the corporate ID because I've worked with customers. Everybody's going to have a login. Well, everybody's going to have an AD username. You may not be populating remedy login ID if your users don't log in. Most everybody I've worked with does, but I've also seen a few that don't. So that's why I threw in the corporate ID so you can do it, either way. Obviously, all of this needs a little tailoring for every environment.
We use the email address as a uniqueness.
Yeah.
Not recommended.
That's the problem that we run into with our process that does this is we'll have people leave the organization, let's say John Smith. And then 2 weeks later, a James Smith comes in and they reuse the login.
That's just bad practice all across the board. That's a whole other discussion. But it's a real problem you have to deal with. So, yeah. And one kind of interesting twist where I spent a lot of my remedy career was we did a lot of identity management, and part of our process was we never reuse an ID. And we had some people like those common first and last names. We are incrementing up to the 50s and maybe even beyond. Yeah. But it worked. We never reused them. What was really cool is we did something I've never seen anybody else do is remedy became the source of truth, and it was a custom app, but it could be people form. Because we not only had employees, but we had contractors and anybody affiliated, anybody who had access to any network system on, for the organization had a record in remedy. That was core. We had a feed from HR, so we were getting the employees, popping that in. And our remedy data was so clean, we actually pushed it to Ldap. So the phone number, if somebody changed their home phone, well, I guess we didn't publish home phone, their office phone number, and they called the service desk, hey, I need to change my phone number, go update in the HR system. The following night, remedy would catch that. We would push it out to AD. But you have to have very clean data and some very good account management processes for that to work.
Luckily, in your situation, you guys have corporate IDs that belong to tax.
Yeah, we're using.
So you have unique system.
Right.
You have unique system IDs that are
Okay.
guaranteed not to be duplicates.
Yep. And the discussion was that they're using CAC IDs, so they have a different unique identifier. So that's it in a nutshell. Like I said, this is something I've just put back together over the last few weeks, mostly from memory, although when I was with the organization, we did a blog post and they had a screenshot. So that kind of helped me jog. I went to their website and like, oh yeah, that's what we did. So yeah.
So you're running this into this custom form. You're not running it into the CTM load people form.
No, I considered that. And that was a discussion I had way back when we built this for our customer. I really liked the idea. I thought about building it this way, but I wanted additional error checking and handling, and I thought it would be messier to build mine and then also deal with BMCs out of the box. So for a while, I was really leaning towards that, but then I thought that was more cumbersome. I just built it all here.
Right.
What version of Remedy are you running?
This is 2002. It's an older ITSM. It's 9103, I think, but people form didn't change that much.
You can still run it at least in 2008 because that's what we're on. It's 2008, and that hasn't changed. That's one thing about Remedy is when they upgrade Remedy, they leave the old stuff and they just add on the new stuff for the most part. It's not a lot of
In the
stuff.
case of 1908.
Yeah.
When they go to 21,
Yeah.
containers.
So
That's his fault. And I'm pointing to LJ.
So one issue with between versions, I did run into this. I gave the spoon definitions to a friend. He's on, I think 913 as well. It's an older version of Spoon. He was not able to load the transformations. So the Remedy workflow works fine, but the Spoon jobs, the steps and all that, he has to rebuild.
Is everybody on Helix in here? BMC Helix. One thing about Helix that you have to be aware of, you have to have a gateway server to do the integration with Ldap. And if they screw something up on BMC side, or if your network screws up on your side, your Ldap job is not going to work. So you always have to reboot or restart the Kawiki service. And so I'm constantly monitoring that because I'll get a network outage on our side and they don't tell me. So, oh yeah, we had issues like yesterday. Well, why didn't you tell me? So now I have to go and start it. But then if they said we didn't have anything, then I have to go to BMC and say, did you do something? But I immediately go ahead and start the Quickie service to get this going. But then I ask them, did they have a glitch, or sometimes they've done an upgrade and didn't tell us, and it had restart the server, but it busted or shut down our network connection. So we had to restart the Quickie server. So that's on Helix. If you ever go to Helix, just be aware of it. Okay. Anybody else have any questions? All right. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.